Take a moment to imagine your grandchildren living in a foreign environment to ours. There is a completely different surrounding array of life, and temperatures are much higher. The ocean is no longer the life encompassing domain it once was, and this is due to rising temperatures from climate change. This is why climate change should be a primary concern in today's society. I care about climate change and its awareness, as we have already been experiencing some effects. Each summer seems to get hotter, bringing about increased temperatures, while every passing winter brings about less snow and storms. The change in temperatures has affected the way I experience my life and others, driving me to confront this problem. Climate change should be a primary concern, as many species will be negatively impacted by changing environmental factors. Varieties of species on Earth will be drastically affected as climate change's effects become more prominent. There are ways to mitigate and prevent this environmental disaster by making a switch to electric vehicles from gasoline powered vehicles and by remodeling refrigerant products to include environmentally friendly alternatives. Let's begin by exploring the negative impacts climate change will have upon species. Climate change has the potential to devastate all types of species due to the environmental changes from increased temperatures. Rising temperatures will negatively impact marine life. Marine life could be significantly affected as temperatures will become too hot for many organisms, leading to extinction. According to a New York Times article by Einhorn, quote, if greenhouse gas emissions remain on current trajectories, the research showed that abrupt collapses in tropical oceans could begin in the next decade. Coral bleaching events over the last several years suggest that these losses have already started. End quote. This devastation in the marine ecosystem will affect all ecosystems as they are interdependent. Beyond marine life, life on land will also be affected by climate change's effects, as many areas will no longer be the homes they were to many species. Species on land will have to migrate to unfavorable faces or they will face extinction as their habitats will become uninhabitable. Many species inhabiting land will either be forced to migrate or will suffer due to these rising temperatures. In an New York Times article by Warren, quote, up to 50% of species could lose most of their suitable climatic conditions by 2100 under the highest greenhouse gases emission scenario, end quote. In this statistic from the United Nations, it shows the projected loss of mammal habitats due to rising temperatures. 4% of mammals lose their habitat with a 1%, 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. 8% of mammals will lose their habitat with a 2-degree Celsius increase. 41% of mammals will go on to lose their habitat with a 3-degree Celsius increase. Increased temperatures are projected to bring about more disorder as conditions will no longer be sustainable for many mammals to survive in. The potential displacement of these species will leave them in areas foreign to their homes and habitats. For example, in the article written by Einhorn, by 2070, 35% of mammals and 29% of birds are projected to have over half of their climatic niche in countries in which they are not currently found. Now that we know the dangers of climate change, let's talk about some solutions. The effects of climate change can be mitigated by switching from gasoline powered vehicles to electric powered vehicles and by making refrigerants more efficient. The major switch from gasoline powered vehicles to electric vehicles can reduce carbon emissions, thereby decreasing the potential effects of climate change. In a New York Times article by Sanjay Gupta, quote, urban transportation is central to the world effort to slow climate change. Home to half the world's population, it accounts for more than 2/3 of global carbon dioxide emissions. In this statistic, by the Natural Resources Defense Council, by 2050, base greenhouse gas emissions can reduce carbon emissions by 45%. In lower greenhouse gas scenarios, which is the ideal scenario in which we can reduce them as much as possible, will reduce carbon emissions by 77%. Many countries are already attempting to make this switch. And according to Sanj Gupta, C40, a coalition of around 100 urban governments, are attempting to address climate change. Transportation accounts for a third of a city's carbon dioxide emissions. While electric vehicles will help stop the negative effects of climate change, remodeling refrigerants will also tremendously help. In remodeling refrigerants to stop the use of chlorofluorocarbons, otherwise known as CHCs, they will contribute far less to climate change. In new research from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California, it indicates that adding improved efficiency in refrigeration and phasing out fluorinated gases used for cooling, as mandated by international agreement, could eliminate a full degree of Celsius warming by 2100. Hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs, account for 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but they can be thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide and may account for up to 19% of emissions by 2050 if their manufacture continues unchecked. That is an article by Hawken. Let's explore how these proposals will act as solutions for mitigating climate change. Using electric vehicles will help reduce carbon emissions, creating fewer greenhouse gases. Electric vehicles will decrease carbon emissions. With the use of trams, cable cars, and electric buses in major cities, the percent of carbon emissions from major cities that contributes to climate change will be significantly decreased. Using trams in major cities will help reduce the carbon footprint of people while still allowing them to travel. In the article by Sanj Gupta, quote, Berlin, along with several European cities, including Lisbon and Dublin, are reviving trams not only to clean the air, but to curb emissions to meet the European Union's legally blinding climate goals, end quote. While the increased use of electric vehicles will have a great influence on stopping the negative effects of climate change, remodeling refrigeration products will as well. Increasing the efficiency of refrigerants will in turn decrease HFCs, creating less harmful products. Refrigerants using fewer HFCs will also mean fewer power plants will be needed to support them. The Lawrence Berkeley study argues that a 30% improvement in efficiency could include the peak load equivalent of about 1,500 power plants by 2030. Efficient cooling will cause less deficiency in other industries. Quote, it matters, researchers say, because coolers have a direct relationship with the building of coal-fired power plants to meet peak demand. If more air conditioners are humming in more homes and offices, then more capacity will be required to meet the demand. That is also from the Lawrence Berkeley study. In conclusion, climate change has already had negative impacts with the potential for far worse unless changes are made. Despite these terrible effects, each one of us can make changes to our lives to help make a difference individually. By taking public transportation and purchasing products without HFCs, large carbon footprints in the world can be decreased, and the world can begin healing from our efforts as a collective. Climate change poses a threat to species all over the earth, as it will continue to destroy the habitats of life with increasing temperatures. By using electric vehicles and efficient refrigerants, we can see improvements against these harmful effects and mitigation of the potential growth. The decrease in HFCs will allow fewer power plants and coal mines to be built, which will reduce carbon emissions, while electric vehicles will allow countries to reach their climate reform goals by avoiding pollutants. Would you want your grandchildren traversing a harmful landscape due to our lack of care to change our ways to help the earth? The first step can be removing HFC products or exchanging them for alternatives to limiting your own carbon footprint to help prevent the advancement of these negative effects. These products, such as air conditioners, can be purchased. Thank you all for listening, and I hope we can go on to be the change the world needs together.